When an incredible millionaire mistakenly entered the wrong car, she revealed an amazing surprise. Claire Morgan, a self-made millionaire and powerhouse CEO, had it all, or so it seemed. As she slipped into what she believed was her gleaming company car, a fraying sense of unease nipped at her heels like a persistent, uninvited shadow. Today held vast importance, a high-stakes meeting promising both opportunity and yield. She could almost hear her employees' expectant murmurs, the pressure swelling like a tidal wave. Yet with each passing block, the weight of her success pressed more heavily against her chest. Was she chasing achievement to escape the ghosts of her humble beginnings, or to fill an ever-widening void? The car's interior flickered familiar, but a fleeting glance at the rearview mirror revealed an unfamiliar face behind the wheel. It was then Claire confronted an unsettling truth. She had entered the wrong vehicle. A squirm of embarrassment twisted her stomach, but before she could formulate a plan, the driver turned and introduced herself as Sarah Jenkins. The dilemmas of this single mother clawed at Claire's consciousness, echoing her own lifelong struggles. Worries about rent, bills, and children swirled around Sarah's words, a stark contrast to Claire's world of boardrooms and investment rounds. Each confession hit Claire with the force of a freight train. Here was every challenge she had desperately worked to escape, laid bare before her. The irony twisted in her gut, a millionaire dashing to a crucial meeting, while a woman juggling life's demands struggled to find stability. They navigated through the affluent suburb, and Claire fought against a rising tide of guilt. She had fought tooth and nail for this life, but at what cost? Did the glittering facade of her success blind her to the raw realities of those around her? Sarah's laughter was strained but genuine, her resilience invigorating yet heartbreaking. With every story, Claire began to realize how futile her past preoccupations felt. Scaling the heights of ambition had come at a crushing personal expense. She felt achingly alone. Just as this emotional churn culminated, the car sputtered, its engine drowning with sharp gasps. This familiar soundtrack of unexpected hurdles clawed their way into Claire's mind, triggering panic that spread through her body like wildfire. Time ticked against her ruthlessly, and the tension knotted tighter in her chest. What were the odds? Here she was, stuck with a woman whose world she once knew but had left behind, knee-deep in her struggles. Before she could settle into frantic thoughts, an instinct propelled her to act. Without a thought, she pulled up her sleeves and offered to help. A startling pivot. She, the CEO in a designer suit, trading her polished life for the grime of mechanics. It felt absurd, yet somehow liberating in its own right.
As they wrestled with the car's hood, amidst jokes and frustrations, an uncomfortable revelation unfolded in Claire's chest. Sarah's ingenuity exploded in quiet brilliance. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. A sudden surge of exhilaration washed over Claire as they finally coaxed the vehicle back to life. Yet, as the purring engine resounded under her palm, the luminous bridge she had begun to foster flickered with uncertainty. Who was she to invite Sarah into her world, a world overflowing with privilege and pressure? Life outside the car existed in stark contrast, a homeless man watching with haunting eyes, a specter of despair starkly aware of the divide between them. And as Claire confronted both the absurdity and realness of their shared moment, she understood a pregnant possibility loomed. Would her ambition truly allow her to reach beyond her own success? Could a partnership with Sarah, born from this volatile twist of fate, redefine her own fractured narrative? Together, as expertly crafted destinies hovered in unsettling balance, the weight intensified, leaving Claire's heart racing with unresolved truths. All that sparked between them felt only like the beginning, a deep riddle begging for unraveling. The journey had barely begun. The engine's hum became a soothing backdrop as Claire shifted her focus back to the reality of her surroundings. She realized their detour had offered more than a mere delay. It had triggered a subtle upheaval in her perception. The car, once a cocoon of privilege, now felt like a vessel for discovery. As she and Sarah exchanged stories, Claire's heart thudded with newfound urgency. There was something about their connection that made her crave exploration beyond her executive lifestyle. "Why do you fight so hard?" Claire asked, a thread of vulnerability woven into her inquiry. Sarah's response was immediate, grounded in a sense of purpose. "Because if I don't keep pushing, who will for my kids? I refuse to let them see me break." Her determination echoed Claire's own relentless climb to the top, but where Claire once found solace in accolades, Sarah sought outcomes far more intimate. Claire felt a flicker of envy ignite within her, a spark that challenged her perspective on what truly mattered. In her relentless pursuit of professional success, had she lost sight of the relationships that nourished the soul?
Her calendar was filled with meetings, but rarely did it contain time for those unscripted moments that felt genuinely lived. Just as her thoughts tangentially meandered, Claire recognized a thread tying together her experience and Sarah's. I used to think ambition was all about personal gain. Now I see it can be a tool for something greater, an opportunity to connect. Sarah's eyes lit up, reflecting her immediate skepticism. You think someone like you could connect with people like me? The challenge stirred something in Claire. Why wouldn't I? We both want to protect what matters most. With that, Claire made an impulsive decision. Let's collaborate. The words flowed from her mouth with surprising clarity. I have resources and connections. You have grit and instinct. Together, we could create something meaningful, something that helps families navigate through tough times. Sarah stared at her, a mix of disbelief and intrigue etched on her face. What exactly did you have in mind? Claire's mind raced to form a tangible idea as they continued to drive. Her experience as a CEO had taught her the value of strategy. She could plot a course that would utilize both their strengths. They could develop a community initiative, perhaps something that offered training or resources for families like Sarah's, targeted not just at survival, but empowerment. I know how to navigate the business landscape. You understand what people like us need, Claire proposed. Imagine a series of workshops providing skills, financial literacy, or even just encouragement. We'd be bridging that uncomfortable gap between privilege and hardship. The air thickened with possibility as the prospect settled between them. Expectations shifted like tides, intrusions of doubt threatening to bubble to the surface. Who was Claire to venture into this precarious territory with someone she barely knew? Yet beneath the surface ripples, an intensity brewed within her. An ember of purpose stirred, igniting a longing to transcend her solitary accomplishments. As Claire considered this new direction, her inner dialogue wrestled with caution. What if this idea floundered? What if their partnership exposed her vulnerabilities more than she'd ever experienced? A creeping dread loomed at the edges of her consciousness, but her resolve battled fiercely against it. Let's meet again soon, Claire concluded, excitement edging out her anxiety. I'll draft up a plan and then we can see if it's worth pursuing. Driving back toward her company, Claire felt buoyant and alive, but also lost in the realization that she was stepping toward the unknown, straddling two worlds that had once felt irreparably diverse. The looming question resonated inside her. What would it mean to immerse herself deeper in Sarah's reality? As she parked and prepared to step into the dazzling but isolating world of her corporate life, a thrill washed over her again, mingling apprehension and eagerness. But now, the stakes felt different. Claire's heart raced with anticipation as she turned back towards the car. What if their partnership could reshape more than just her perspective, but alter her very identity? The moment of engagement echoed with audacity, prompting her to contemplate how this venture might challenge everything she'd become. The unraveling journey had evolved into clarity, yet uncertainty clung tightly. What awaited beyond mere ambition? Perhaps it was time to confront the hidden layers within herself that had remained untouched for far too long. The question loomed larger. Would she dare to carve a path mutable enough to encompass both her world and Sarah's, or would fear hold her back? The moment for daring action was fast approaching. The glow of her office building was unforgiving as Claire stepped inside, the posed smiles of her colleagues juxtaposed with the inner turmoil brewing beneath her polished exterior. Team meetings felt inconsequential now, filled with jargon and safe discussions that didn't resonate with the soul. As she walked past the gleaming glass walls, she couldn't help but ponder what had shifted within her. Armed with the vision of her collaboration with Sarah, Claire churned over her business acumen, brainstorming ways to ground her lofty ideas into actionable steps. However, the familiar rhythm of her corporate life weighed heavier with each passing moment. The bustling of the office felt like a reminder of what she was leaving behind, the very essence of connection that had eluded her for so long. Great initiative on the new client acquisition, her assistant, Emily, beamed, handing her a stack of reports to review. Claire offered a half-hearted smile, the papers crisp and unyielding, resembling the expectations laid upon her shoulders. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the recognition, but it was a ghost of satisfaction that left her hollow. As she settled into her office, the sights of accolades arrayed on walls felt foreign, symbols of past triumphs. Claire leaned back in her chair,
letting a deep breath escape. The world she held as her fortress was beginning to feel like a prison. She envisioned Sarah's children, vulnerable, waiting with hope for their mother's next move. And yet here she was, cloistered in the confines of wealth, detached from authentic growth. Perhaps it was time to step out from behind the polished veneer and confront the truth. Her motives had to shift from individual accolades to communal impact. It was a compelling revelation, yet it also tugged at the strings of her identity. Could she intertwine her professional ambitions with a purpose greater than herself? As she drafted the rough outline of their workshops, she considered the depth of her responsibility.
Claire recognized that this partnership was more than an opportunity for outreach. It was a challenge to dismantle her own barriers. Would she have the courage to be vulnerable in her pursuit of empathy? Her phone buzzed, breaking through her contemplation. It was Sarah, a simple message illuminating her screen. "Really excited for our meeting. Let's change some lives." The enthusiasm in those words sparked a flame of resolve within Claire. This venture would not merely be a professional engagement. It was an awakening. Amid urgency and uncertainty, she began to expand her vision. Initially, figures danced across spreadsheets, numbers that spoke to efficiency and profit. But could they articulate human connection? She shifted her gaze to Sarah's earlier answer about fighting for her kids. That passion ignited something fierce within Claire, a desire to channel her business skills into creating something that genuinely mattered. Still, doubts crept back in. Would her affluent background overshadow her attempts to connect? And who was she to conduct workshops based on experiences she had never truly lived? The implications of her privilege loomed like a shadow, threatening to cloud her intention. Yet Claire found herself at a crossroads, deciding whether to pursue this newfound path or retreat to the safety of her world. Each day spent working on her ideas felt like an act of rebellion, a rejection of the status quo in favor of unconventional purpose. Discomfort churned within her. She needed to challenge herself, to discard the anchor of doubt, and instead embrace the buoyancy of action. As the hours wore on, thoughts blurred into lists of potential contacts, resources, and feedback channels. She could only hope to shed her long-held fears and have the courage to engage. However, a quiet voice whispered deep within her, questioning her readiness to face the grittiness of life outside her corporate bubble. Determined, Claire jotted down notes in her planner, sketching out the ideal structure for their workshops, aiming at concrete skills that could foster real change. She envisioned not only guidance but empowerment, tools that would help families take their lives into their own hands. But as anticipation surged, a reality within her hollowed confidence sparked fear anew. What if the workshops exposed her limitations rather than celebrating her strengths? Would this venture actually unveil the cracks in her carefully curated identity? The stakes were unusually high, yet she craved the thrill of authenticity more than the fear of failure. Her phone buzzed again, and she jumped, glancing at the message. It was a straightforward call to action, asking what time they could finalize plans for an initial meeting. Claire felt a surge of determination. "Yes," she replied, the word resonating with possibility. It wasn't merely a commitment to Sarah or their chatting. It was a promise to commit to an uncomfortable exploration of her true self.
But with all this uncharted territory ahead of her, the echoes of doubt lingered loudly. Could this venture transcend mere business and lead to a genuine transformation? What awaited her once she stepped beyond the bounds of her comfort zone? The moment of action was near. Would she be ready to face what lay on the other side of her own ambition? The morning sun barely crested the skyline as Claire arrived at the cafe later that week. The air was infused with the rich aroma of brewed coffee, a stark contrast against the sterile atmosphere of her office. She felt an unfamiliar flutter of nerves as she entered, almost like a first date. Today would be different. Today she would meet Sarah to refine their plans, a step into her tantalizing yet daunting new life. Claire scanned the cafe for Sarah, her heart racing with anticipation and self-doubt. Was she ready for this? Could she genuinely connect with people whose lives were so starkly different from her own? As she approached the corner table where Sarah sat, flipping through notes with a zeal that was contagious, the worries began to fade, replaced by a fragile sense of purpose. "Claire, it's so good to see you." Sarah's enthusiasm sparkled, momentarily saturating the air between them. They exchanged pleasantries, but Claire found herself fixating inwardly, dissecting every word and gesture, gauging her own authenticity against Sarah's passion. After ordering her drink, Claire felt the urge to confess the turmoil swirling inside her. "I'm scared, Sarah," she admitted, her voice softer than she intended. "What if I'm not the right person to lead these workshops? I've never faced the hardships that others have."
Fear is part of growth, Sarah said, her expression unwavering. You've made it far in your career because you know how to lead. Now it's about learning to empathize and share that knowledge with others. You bring something invaluable to the table. Claire nodded, soaking in Sarah's encouragement, though her mind remained tethered to her apprehensions. The challenge felt monumental. Could she truly bridge the gap between her world and those she aimed to help? She trusted her skills but faltered at the thought of authentic vulnerability. Her success had always hinged on control and performance. Would history repeat itself, or could she evolve beyond her own limitations? They dove into the logistics of their workshops, each idea layered with aspirations. Claire mapped out her vision, outlining practical strategies while also grappling with the dissonance of her affluent background against the reality of the families they aimed to empower. Words flowed from her pen, but the spirit behind them often flickered as doubt shadowed her progress. Let's incorporate stories, Sarah suggested, her voice vibrant with enthusiasm. Real experiences from the families themselves. Claire felt a swell of inspiration.
Yet even as she sketched the framework of the program, unease began to ripple within her. How could they foster genuine dialogue? With every decision they made, the weight of responsibility grew heavier, along with Claire's acknowledgement of her privilege. Later that week, Claire decided to visit a local community center, a decision blending trepidation with excitement. As the center came into view, uneasiness coiled within her. She oscillated between the urge to retreat and the desire to learn. Gathering her resolve, Claire stepped inside, heart pounding as she initiated conversations with the staff and families. Each story shared illuminated challenges she had only read about in reports, stark realities that felt all too distant just days ago. Yet amidst the weight of those stories, Claire found a strength burgeoning within her. The connection was palpable, laughter and tears woven together in the fabric of their interactions. She began to recognize the raw courage required to rebuild lives. By the time she left, she felt changed, transformed not by the desire to give back, but by a rush of empathy flooding her once guarded heart. On her drive home, Claire's thoughts swirled like the autumn leaves drifting past her window. She realized her path wouldn't be just about leading workshops or offering solutions. It was about stepping into someone else's shoes and truly listening. But despite her newfound zeal, a haunting question lingered. Was this experience the catalyst she craved, or would it expose weaknesses she was not ready to confront? Facing the reality of her past, her safe haven began to feel more like an anchor than a shield. As she parked her car, Claire caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror, the face of a woman at the precipice of change. Taking a deep breath, she whispered her resolve once again. I can do this. But as her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, another wave of anxiety washed over her. Hey, can we talk later? I have an urgent update. The words unsettled her. What lay ahead might shift everything they'd begun to build. Would this update prove to be a test of her commitment to this new life? Claire's heart raced as possibilities flooded her mind, the thrill of the unknown spiraling into a dizzying uncertainty. Would she embrace the challenge or falter once more in the face of adversity? Claire's heart beat faster as she opened the message, curiosity mingling with dread. Sarah's urgent tone suggested something significant, an opportunity, a setback, or perhaps a shift in their plans. She knew she needed to prepare herself for whatever was to come. Was she genuinely ready to step off her well-trodden path into a realm where she felt so uncertain? Later that evening, Claire arranged her notes and prepared herself for the call. The flickering lights of dusk outside her window mirrored her rising apprehension. She was determined to be strong, to face whatever news awaited her.
The very thought that any news from Sarah could affect the lives of those she aimed to support filled her with both dread and resolve. As soon as the call connected, Sarah's voice crackled through the line, sounding breathless. Claire, I'm so glad to catch you. I just had a meeting with the board and there's something incredible we need to discuss. Claire's nerves danced as she listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps they had secured more funding or a new partnership that could amplify their efforts? But as Sarah continued, Claire's optimism began to wither. So, we have this opportunity to present at a national conference on community empowerment, Sarah explained, her voice unwavering. But there's a catch. They want us to showcase our workshops in front of potential donors and stakeholders. They believe in our vision, but this means we have to be ready to present instead of just running workshops. A whirlwind of emotions surged within Claire, and her initial excitement turned to anxiety. The idea of standing before a room of industry leaders, sharing not just their mission but her very soul, felt overwhelming. What if she faltered?
The very vulnerability she had recently begun to embrace suddenly seemed like a risk she wasn't ready to take. "I don't know, Sarah," Claire stammered, an edge of panic creeping into her voice. "What if I can't handle that kind of pressure? What if I freeze?" "Or," Sarah countered, her tone firm yet kind, "what if this is your moment to advocate for the families who need our program? You've spent this time listening and learning. Now it's time to share that passion. You can do this." Claire felt the weight of Sarah's words, yet insecurity gnawed at her. What if the audience saw through her polished exterior and recognized her fear? Yet there was a spark of defiance flickering within her, driven by the memories of the stories she had heard during her visit to the community center. "Maybe I can try," Claire said slowly, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I'll need your help to prepare. This is more than just a workshop. It needs to resonate and feel authentic." "Of course, we'll pull together a presentation that reflects not just our work, but the voices of the families we serve. Let's include their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs. That will connect with people in a way statistics and data never could," Sarah proposed excitedly. As they discussed logistics, Claire felt the tension in her shoulders ease marginally. This was more than a presentation. It was an opportunity to act as a bridge between two worlds she had previously seen as rigidly divided. Claire could allow her vulnerability to be a strength, show the humanity behind the statistics, and step into authenticity in a way she had never dared before. But then, a shadow of doubt settled in her mind. What if she failed to convey their collective message?
Claire had always been adept at controlling her environment, crafting the perfect narrative. This was new territory, requiring her to relinquish that control in favor of emotional honesty. As the conversation wrapped up, Claire set her intentions to prepare, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through her veins. Yet that lingering question returned, echoing louder than ever. Was she ready to face these fears, or would she retreat into the security of her past? Determined not to let her doubts define her, Claire resolved to meet the challenge head-on. The preparation ahead would be an exercise not just in professional growth, but in personal transformation. Later that night, as she lay in bed, the juxtaposition of dread and potential swirled in her mind. Claire closed her eyes, envisioning the presentation, a mix of her polished professional persona and the newfound authenticity she had begun to embrace. Would it culminate in a triumph of vulnerability, or unmask her insecurities? As she drifted off to sleep, one thought pierced through the fog. The time had come to face the fears I've always hidden from. Would she embrace this challenge, or stumble in the light of scrutiny? The dawn loomed ahead, promising answers to the questions that now consumed her. Claire woke early the next morning, sunlight filtering through her curtains, casting patterns on the walls like whispers of encouragement. She sat up, brushing the remnants of sleep from her eyes. Today marked the beginning of her preparation, not just for the presentation itself, but for a moment that felt pivotal in her journey. She grabbed her notebook, filled with her scribbles, outlining ideas, experiences, and the stories she was committed to sharing. The magnitude of the task flooded her with apprehension. Would her attempts to be authentic resonate, or would her insecurities overshadow the very message she aimed to convey? Claire needed to articulate the challenges and successes of the family she hoped to represent, yet she felt a familiar urge to revert to her safe, polished approach. After a quick breakfast, she sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began researching effective presentation techniques. Each article she scrolled through promised success strategies and tips for engaging storytelling. Yet amidst the instructions was the nagging realization that she needed to integrate her true self into the narrative. Claire couldn't solely rely on methodical frameworks. Her authenticity must lead the way. She stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. This was not merely a platform to showcase statistics. It was an opportunity to unveil the human side, the resilience, dreams, and struggles of individuals behind the numbers. It terrified her to consider being vulnerable, but the potential impact was palpable, almost electric. She had seen those lives transformed, felt their stories seep into her heart, and now it was time to give them a voice.
The clock ticked as time slipped through her fingers. With a newfound sense of urgency, Claire picked up the phone and called Sarah. "We need to meet, like right now. I have ideas, but I want to make sure we're aligned." When they convened at their usual cafe, Claire could feel the electricity in the air. "Let's start by mapping out the stories we want to tell. What speaks to our mission the most?" she suggested, fueled by a passion that had been dormant but was now rising. The two dove into brainstorming, listing out stories of perseverance and hope. They spoke of families who had broken cycles of hardship and who now thrived, illustrating their journeys with emotions rather than statistics. As Sarah began sketching out points to cover, Claire felt an unfamiliar thrill.
The focus shifted from her fears to the lives they sought to uplift. Yet, unbidden, doubt nudged at her. What if she faltered while speaking? What if her nerves rendered her incapable of captivating the audience? What if I forget everything? She asked, the vulnerability creeping back into her voice. Then you remember why you're there, Sarah replied, unwavering. You're not merely presenting a project, you're telling a story that needs to be shared. That's far more powerful than memorized facts. Trust in that connection. As they neared the end of their session, Claire felt a shift within her. She was beginning to embrace her fears, channeling them into motivation rather than letting them stifle her growth. It became clear that this was a chance to confront the insecurities that had held her back for so long. She realized that her value lay not in perfection, but in authenticity, and that unveiling her imperfect self could foster deeper connections. Once they wrapped up, Claire left the cafe buoyed by a sense of purpose. As she walked home, her mind buzzed with thoughts of how to weave personal anecdotes into the presentation. Every step felt lighter, as if the weight of her doubts diminished with each stride. Yet doubt lingered, a persistent shadow whispering that she might not be enough. Would her courage hold as the date approached? The window of time pressed on her, forcing her to confront the specter of failure lurking just out of sight. That night, as Claire sat in her living room preparing her notes, she found herself staring blankly at the pages in front of her. What if it wasn't enough? What if she failed to capture what truly mattered? Frustrated, she tossed the pages aside, confronting the swirling emotions that surfaced. Vulnerability felt like a chasm. She was at the precipice and edging closer. With a deep breath, she reached for her notebook again and began writing. Each word transformed her anxiety into resolve, marking the evolution from fear to opportunity. Yet even as clarity emerged, a new concern bubbled beneath the surface. Could she truly share herself with an audience?
When the moment of truth arrived, would she have the courage to unveil the authenticity she was striving for? The looming conference felt closer than ever. This was her chance to rediscover herself, an opportunity teetering on the brink of possibility and fear. She realized she had to challenge the narrative in her mind. Failure was not the end. What if, instead, it became the catalyst springing her for a transformation she had long sought? As she prepared for bed, Claire felt a flicker of determination igniting within her, ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. Just as she closed her eyes, one final thought echoed in her mind, potent with both dread and hope. If she took this leap, what would she discover about herself? Would she embrace the discomfort or return to the shadows of her previous self? The moment of reckoning was approaching, brimming with untold potential and unspoken fears. Claire awoke the next morning, an uncomfortable sensation gnawing at her stomach. The presentation loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, acutely aware that her apprehension was growing thicker, making it difficult to breathe. The enormity of the upcoming opportunity gnawed at her, a moment where she could either rise or collapse under her own fears. Her fingers reluctantly grazed the pages of her notebook. The phrases she'd pored over reminded her of the raw emotions she had decided to unveil. It was one thing to write, it was another to deliver those messages live. With a deep breath, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and pushed herself upright. It was time to make a plan, and what better way to do it than to map out her fears? Reaching for her notebook again, Claire began listing her anxieties, each one an honest reflection of what she perceived as her limitations. What if her voice trembled? What if the audience turned apathetic? What if... Claire's pen paused as she sensed a new idea bubbling up within her. Instead of merely confronting her doubts, what if she turned them into strengths? Each fear could be transformed into a point of connection. The notion began to ignite something within her. Fueled by this newfound insight, she wrote, "Fear, forgetting my lines," and countered it with strength, sharing anecdotes that flow from the heart. This exercise felt invigorating. With every fear listed and countered, Claire felt herself expanding, her worries subsiding into the background as she focused on the deeper truths behind her presentation. With her thoughts crystallizing, she decided to incorporate moments of humanity in her storytelling. She recalled the families who had opened up to her, those whose struggles had mingled with resilience. What they had endured was not data, it was life, complex and real. She scribbled down the most vivid memories, ensuring that they felt alive in her mind.
By midday, her notebook was bursting with potential narratives, and her confidence grew with each penned line. Claire found herself stepping into the role of a storyteller, not just a presenter. The static boundaries between performer and audience began to blur. She realized she couldn't just recount stories, she wanted to embody them. With each word, she unearthed a profound realization. People connect with authenticity, not perfection. This was about more than just overcoming her fears. It was about diving headfirst into vulnerability and allowing it to shape her delivery. That evening, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, rehearsing her lines. The anxiety still danced around her, but she found comfort in acknowledging it as part of the process. The reflection looking back at her was changing, a determination lighting up her eyes. She wasn't merely Claire, the anxious presenter. She was Claire, a vessel for stories waiting to be told. As the days melted into one another, she focused on practicing not just the words, but also how to convey raw emotions that resonated. Scripting moments where she'd acknowledge her fears during the talk began to feel liberating. She even dared to imagine asking the audience to share snippets of their own stories, creating a dialogue rather than a one-sided presentation. Yet, a nagging thought lurked in the back of her mind. What if her heart opened up so fully that it made her vulnerable to rejection? What if they didn't respond as she imagined? Would she break under the scrutiny? The night before her presentation, she lay in bed, replaying her vision for the talk, now more vivid than before. Every time insecurity whispered doubts, she steeled herself, clenching her fists as if to hold tight to her balance. The moment she had long prepared for was only hours away. Claire felt her heart drum a rhythm of anticipation and dread. She realized too much was on the line, both for her and for those whose stories she would share. As she closed her eyes, a stirring hit her. A decision loomed in the shadows of her mind. She could either let her fears hold her captive or leap into the unknown, trusting that it was exactly there, in that terrifying vulnerability, she would find her voice. The choice was becoming clearer, but would it solidify as she stood in front of the crowd? The dawn of the new day teased her, and with it brought the promise of a challenge that could change everything. Would Claire confront the moment with strength, or would she crumble beneath the weight of her anxieties? Today would be the day she finally discovered the depths of her courage, no matter the result. What awaited her at the edge of that leap? Claire woke abruptly, the white noise of her thoughts colliding as she glanced at the clock. The time was slipping away, and today was the day. Bursting with adrenaline, she pushed the duvet aside and stood up, a flicker of fear sparking in her belly.
The room felt charged, almost suffocating, but she clasped her notebook tightly, grounding herself. Instead of dwelling on all the what-ifs, she flipped through the pages. Each entry had become a lifeline, her map through the noise of self-doubt. Undoing the spiral binding, she took a deep breath and began to read aloud, her voice trembling at first, but gathering strength with each word. I am not here to perfect a performance. I am here to share connections. The words echoed softly, reverberating in the small space as if to solidify her resolve. With the sun creeping through her window, illuminating her determined expression, Claire danced through her mental pathways. Every fear she had was an obstacle in her path, yet now they felt more like stepping stones. She imagined the audience, not as a rigid assembly judging her, but as individuals eager to engage. Each face was a potential ally on this journey she was undertaking. This perspective shift was empowering, adding fuel to her courage. After gathering her thoughts, she headed to the kitchen for a breakfast of fruit and yogurt. The nourishment felt like a ritual more than a meal. The spicy notes of ginger tea warmed her throat, and with each sip she fortified her spirit. Engaging with herself in the quiet allowed her to embrace her vulnerabilities rather than suppress them. In that intimate moment, she whispered affirmations, reclaiming her voice. It was a powerful reminder. Every person in the room was human, each navigating their unique fears and stories. Claire's mind pinged to the rehearsal she'd practiced last night. She had paused in front of the mirror, framing her thoughts around a pivotal moment, choosing to ask the audience for their own stories. The exhilaration of shared experience sparked within her, but apprehension washed over as conflicting thoughts dived back in. What if they were silent? What if her courage severed the connection instead of building it? The anxiety weighed on her as she scrutinized the internal battleground of her emotions. Somewhere between sips of tea and the clatter of utensils, an extraordinary clarity washed over her. Self-doubt was an unwelcome guest in her mind, but she could be the host, transforming the energy of fear into a conversation. Both she and the audience were voyagers in this realm of storytelling, each contributing to a tapestry woven with vulnerability. As she finished her breakfast, an idea ignited. What if she encouraged them to write down a fear, folding it into a paper boat, and letting those fears float away in a collective release? The act would symbolize a transition from fear to understanding, a unifying moment. The thought made her feel buoyant, an image of possibility swirling in her mind. Now it was more than just delivering stories. It was about creating a shared experience. Confidence began to bloom within her, larger than just the fear of public speaking. It was about healing.
Claire closed her eyes to visualize it, the energy surging, laughter flowing, connections forming. The fear was still present, but it paled against the light of her mission. Dressed in a simple yet striking outfit, she looked in the mirror again, her reflection tilting from anxious to resolute. Each detail mattered, from the cascading layers of her hair to the disciplined posture she adopted. This was Claire, no longer merely a girl with a notebook. This was Claire, a storyteller ready to embrace the moment. She reached for her backpack, her heart racing as she stepped outside. The world felt vibrant and buzzing with potential. Today, she was more than just a participant. She was a trailblazer, ready to carve her space, ready for the impending dive into the depths of her fears. But as she took her first steps, doubt clung to the edges. What if the audience didn't respond as she hoped? That lingering apprehension hung like a cloudy veil, a reminder that an unexpected storm could still brew. As the venue approached, a new thought flashed in her mind. Perhaps this was not just her stage to claim, but a collective journey waiting for momentum. Would Claire confront the challenge before her, or would the path veer into shadows? A thunderous heartbeat echoed. What awaited her as she neared the threshold? As Claire approached the venue, her heartbeat quickened, the pulse of anxiety thrumming in rhythm with her determination. She stood outside the entrance, hesitating, the auditorium's door looming ahead like a portal into the unknown. This was the moment, the opportunity to transform herself from a passive observer of her fears into an active participant in her own story. Yet part of her feared that stepping through that door might mean confronting not just an audience, but the parts of herself she had hidden away for too long. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself of the vision she had crafted over breakfast. She wasn't merely there to speak, she was ready to connect. The paper boats filled with fears, each folding representing a shared vulnerability, it was powerful imagery. As she turned the handle, rather than succumbing to doubt, she chose to embrace the idea that she could foster a collective experience. Once inside, the atmosphere was electric. The buzz of conversation surrounded her, a chorus of shared anticipation. She scanned the sea of faces, each person lost in their thoughts, and for a moment she was tempted to back away. A fleeting image of the audience huddled in silence flooded her mind, a shadow against her resolute. What if they don't understand, she thought, almost objectively as if someone else had said it. It was time to shatter that thought pattern. Claire took a step forward, her eyes catching the gentle smile a woman sitting alone in the front row. Suddenly, she recognized a truth. This was not just about her performance, but it was also about those shared stories, the authentic moments that could unfold in front of her.
Shifting her focus, she reminded herself of her own journey, the doubts she harbored, the resilience she had painstakingly cultivated. Each person was likely fighting their own battle, just as she was. Adjusting her posture, Claire walked to the stage, a stage that loomed large, yet she found herself standing taller with each step. She paused, scanning the crowd, exhaling slowly to temper the whirlwind of her thoughts. The spotlight felt warm rather than harsh as she adjusted the microphone. Claire cleared her throat, gripping the edge of the podium. It was now or never. The room hushed as she began. "Good morning, everyone," she opened with sincerity, her voice steadying. "I'm here not just to share my story, but to invite you into a conversation about fear, vulnerability, and connection." The uncertainty in her stomach began to ebb as she spoke. The topic resonated, drawing nods and smiles from those listening. Recognizing the shift, Claire leaned into her narrative, weaving anecdotes from her past with fresh insights. She spoke of how fear had held her back, yet she discovered strength in shared stories. The paper boats, an interactive moment she could feel rising within her, felt like a beacon. "Today, I want to create a space for all of us," she continued, gesturing toward the audience. "If you have a fear that feels heavy, I invite you to write it down and fold it into a paper boat." Excitement crackled through the air at the idea. "Together, we'll release them into the sea." As she guided the audience through the writing and folding process, Claire reveled in the exchanges happening around her. Conversations blossomed, laughter erupted, and for the first time her heart raced not from anxiety, but joy. They were in this together. She had bridged the chasm that had once felt insurmountable. In those moments, self-doubt crept back just beyond her peripheral vision, whispering temptations of failure. But now she met it with defiance. This wasn't her only chance. She was mastering the act of continuous emergence.
Realizing this, a spark ignited deep within her. She wanted to keep this momentum going, to instill the courage to keep facing their fears, even after this moment ended. As the final paper boat sailed away, Claire's heart swelled. There was a flicker of something deeper within her, awakening her purpose and potential. What if this was just the beginning? What if there were more to explore, more truths to uncover? But before she could dwell further, the lights dimmed. A shift in atmosphere cast shadows across her newfound confidence. Who would emerge now from those shadows? Claire's anticipation, tinged with trepidation, deepened. What lay ahead, and was she ready to embrace what challenge awaited her? As the lights dimmed, Claire embraced the swirling emotions within her. The din of voices faded as she prepared to pivot from the comfort of shared vulnerability to the uncharted territory of personal authenticity.
This was not merely about sharing her story anymore. It was about the invitation to connect, not just with the audience, but with herself in a way that had eluded her for years. Slowly, she stepped away from the podium, allowing the audience's excitement to breathe and resonate. Claire recalled a time when her ambition was singular, fixed only on accolades and success. But now, here she was, relinquishing that narrow focus, ready to confront the fears that had held her captive. As she paced across the stage, the vulnerability she had felt moments ago transformed into a strength she hadn't known was there. "Let's talk about fear," she addressed the crowd again, feeling the urgent swell of connection. Fear doesn't have to be a barrier. It can be a catalyst, a wind beneath our wings if we allow it. Choosing to share her memories of grappling with her journey, the sleepless nights, the tremors before each meeting, and the nagging sensation that maybe she wasn't enough, revived her sense of purpose. Every truth was less about a polished exterior and more about showcasing growth. She felt a tidal wave of liberation wash over her. No longer was she the untouchable CEO living in a gilded cage. She was relatable, human. "Just last week, I felt overwhelmed by doubt about my ability to lead this initiative. Perhaps you felt something similar," Claire confessed, her voice raw and genuine. The audience nodded, a collective understanding blossoming in the space between them. Noticing the shift in their expressions, Claire seized the moment. "But together, we access our greatest potential. So I ask you today, what life do you want to build? What will you risk to see it happen? Embrace that discomfort. Let's forge ahead." As she moved deeper into her narrative, she couldn't help but weave in the stories shared by the families she had met. Relevant, poignant, and ethereal, they sparked a light that deepened her connection with the audience. The strength and grit she had witnessed became her own fuel, propelling her forward in confidence. The room, once filled with skepticism, buzzed now with energy, engagement, and curiosity. Faces once shrouded in doubt now shone brightly, reflecting the hope born of shared experiences. She paused to look directly into the eyes of her audience, searching for connections, moments where her story mirrored theirs. With trembling resolve, she introduced her initiative formally. "This program is not about me or Sarah leading a workshop. It's about community, empowerment, and resounding voices that have long been silenced." The collective gasp that echoed offered her a breath of reassurance, solidifying her intention to walk this uncharted path. "I want you all to see yourselves in this," Claire continued, amplifying her tone with conviction. "Our challenges unite us. No one should feel alone in their journey, and I am committed to building a bridge to foster understanding, growth, and positive change."
As her words flowed, Claire felt the full weight of her vulnerability morph into strength, the realization that her past struggles had molded her into a connector of people. This moment was her confirmation and validation, a defining chapter that would alter her path. Finally, she moved toward a close and extended an invitation. "I encourage all of us to come together regularly, not just to workshop, but to share our narratives, ignite our passions, and empower one another. This is not the end, it's only the beginning." The audience erupted into enthusiastic applause, cheers cascading throughout the auditorium, echoing the energy that now filled the air. Claire stepped back, tears brimming in her eyes when she faced a standing ovation, overwhelmed by a flood of gratitude and joy. That was it, the culmination of her fears and triumphs, forging a newfound purpose in this moment. She had created connection, opened doors for others, and transformed the concept of success into something wholly richer than she ever imagined. As she descended the stage, people approached her, voices bubbling over with excitement about their stories and the possibilities ahead. She felt a solid sense of belonging, a keen recognition of her place within a collective mission. The lines between her world and Sarah's were no longer blurry. They were distinctly intertwined in purpose and urgency. In the days following the conference, Claire's life shifted dramatically. She finally stepped into a role where she lived unapologetically in connection, bridging the rich tapestry of human experience with practical solutions. Praise and validation came pouring in, but Claire realized that her transformation had derived not from success in the conventional sense, but rather from the courage to embrace vulnerability and authenticity. That meeting with Sarah became the genesis of a tangible outreach program that addressed real issues, driving sustainable change in their community. As they co-created workshops blossomed into a supportive network, intertwining skills, hope, and collaboration that penetrated beyond any single initiative. Families began fostering true empowerment, and in witnessing their growth, Claire witnessed her own, all sparked from a seemingly ordinary encounter that challenged her to redefine success. Through this journey, Claire Morgan proved to herself and the world that vulnerabilities could indeed be powerful catalysts, not just for individual success, but for collective transformation. She had shattered her self-limiting beliefs and emerged stronger than ever, with a profound understanding that true value exists in the connections we nurture and the lives we uplift. She achieved not just recognition, but genuine fulfillment, and she wore it like armor. Claire smiled at the reflection in the mirror one last time, knowing that today was merely a stepping stone toward a lifetime of transformative opportunities.
And there, in that moment, she recognized her next mission: to inspire others to embrace their own courage, to awaken their potential, and to connect on a deeper human level. This was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.